Well, good morning, everybody. And what a wonderful occasion it is to offer a special prayer of thanks for Alex and Tristan and their family today. They're looking forward to having their boys baptised when they reach their new home in Brisbane, in Queensland, amongst the church family that will be supporting them moving forward. Beautiful milestone that awaits them that they'll be able to share with family who are there as well. But it is our privilege today to offer a prayer of thanks and send them with our blessing. And it's a beautiful occasion and perfect, I think, to also talk about the Christian community. And I don't know whether you noticed, but one of the hallmarks of the community that we heard about in the reading is that an incredible sense of gratitude and joy for life with God. So it's a very fitting text to be looking at today. We're beginning a sermon series on the book of Acts, and I'm only really introducing it today, but if you're new to the Bible, what you need to know about Acts is that it's really a sequel to one of the Gospels, Luke. Luke is a carefully crafted account of the life, death, and resurrection of the real historical person, Jesus of Nazareth. Now, Acts is rightly described as the history of the early church, but as a sequel to Luke, it's part 2 of the life of Jesus in this world. Because Jesus' life in the world did not end with his ascension into heaven after the resurrection. The presence of Jesus is manifest in the world through his church, by his Holy Spirit. And so the book of Acts could be rightly called What Jesus Did Next. And in Acts we see that what God began in Jesus, he continues to do. And that is to bring into the world something new. A church as a community of people under the reign of Jesus, living out a new way of being human. And that community is characterised by the things we heard about in our reading today. And it sounds idyllic, doesn't it? It's a place where everybody belongs, everybody shares, everyone eats together, everyone is grateful, no one is left behind. It's a community where God and human relationships are at the centre. But how does this community in Acts come about? And how are we going to even approximate such a vision of community as the church today? Is it realistic? Well, while the exact details may be different for us, I want to argue that the DNA that's at the heart of the early church community is something we are called to share. But it's going to cost us. And what it will cost us is being cut to the heart. I want to take us back so I can show you what I mean. I said earlier that Acts is a sequel to Luke. In all of the Gospels, the narrative slows right down in the week of events leading up to the death of Jesus. And Luke is no different. In fact, he devotes a whole quarter of his gospel text to that part of the story. And this tells us that for Luke, as for the other gospel writers, the manner of Jesus' death, the fact of his resurrection, and the meaning are of supreme importance. And the passage that we read today is about a community that sprung up out of hearing a sermon preached about the meaning of exactly these events, the death and resurrection of Jesus. It was preached by Peter after the Holy Spirit came upon him and a group of disciples and set their tongues on fire so they could tell the news about Jesus to a gathered community of worshipping Jewish people who had come to Jerusalem from neighbouring countries for a festival. So they heard this message in their own tongue. And the crux of Peter's carefully constructed argument was this: this Jesus of Nazareth, whom you condemned to death as a false prophet, was in fact God's chosen Messiah. Now, I can't imagine what a shock it must have been for them to realise. I wonder whether it was like one of those drawings that you probably are familiar with, the ones that they look like one thing, but there's a hidden figure inside. You can't quite make it out, and then suddenly you see it. And now you can't unsee it. And it seems so obvious. And now you wonder how you could have missed it. But whatever the experience of the hearers, this is how it's described in Acts 1, verse 37, before our passage today. It's described like this: when the people heard this, they were cut to the heart. Cut to the heart. You see, for them, for you, for me, it's costly to move from illusions we might have of ourselves of comfortable respectability to thinking we had anything to do at all with the death of Jesus, the Son of God. And if Peter had only said in verse 1:23, this man was handed over to you, and you with the help of wicked men put him to death, well, that news would have been a message of condemnation for the hearers. But there was a caveat. It was not all that was said. And what Peter says is this: this man was handed over to you by God's set purposes. By God's set purposes and foreknowledge. You see, the listeners realised that they were a culpable people, a cutthroat people. But God was cut to the heart over them. So cut to the heart that he sent his Son into the world for the very purpose of having his life cut short for their sake, so that he could take all the sin and condemnation away and overturn death through his resurrection. And so it costs them, as it costs each of us, the humility of admitting our culpability, our own part, our shared sinful resistance to let God simply be God. Or maybe the opposite might feel true for you. Maybe you are aware of your shortcomings, the mistakes that you make. And you might think and fear that God couldn't accept someone like you. And what I say to you is this: to let yourself be cut to the heart of the love and the mercy that God has to you, because it works both ways. There's so much more I could say about the rhythms that naturally arose from the early church, this community of ones who were cut to the heart. Rhythms that sustained them and fueled the explosive, unstoppable growth as they spread this same message of God's love through Jesus throughout the world. Rhythms of devotion to the apostles' teaching, to fellowship, to remembering the death of Jesus through the breaking of bread and through prayer. But let me draw our attention to just one of these rhythms. Coming together at the Lord's table when we partake of bread and wine is a way of letting our hearts be cut afresh, not by shame or guilt, but by humble, glad acceptance of the loving mercy of a God who sent Jesus to have his life cut off for our sakes. And we thank God that that's not the end of the story. We also celebrate the resurrection, and we look forward to his coming again when we share in that way. But when a community is full of people who will let themselves be cut to the heart by such love again and again, it can become a community like the one in Acts, a community characterised by the things that we read about. One where everybody belongs, where everyone is grateful and no one is left behind. A community where God and human relationships are at the centre. As long as we are willing to be cut to the heart, because that's how the Spirit gets in. So we're going to move now to a time of thanksgiving. And if you've been here and been part of a baptism service, you know that what we usually do is move our way towards the font. And we're not having a water baptism today, but we are having a moment in that same area. So I'm inviting us all to come and gather around the Trenneman family so that they can stay as they are. And we'll come to them.